Welcome to PolyCast, a civilization podcast focused on game strategy.
DanQ.
Makalua.
TheMeInTeam.
QNL.
With guest co-hosts
colonelmustard.
Emperor Peter.
Wait, this is something about Civ, right?
What, is that what this show is about? Gee, I don't know.
Sometimes, once in a while.
Sometimes. So, Joel and Peter, you're getting an idea of the stuff that gets cut?
Yes. Welcome to PolyCast, episode 89. Colonel Mustard. We have DanQ.
Hello, all.
TheMeInTeam.
Present.
QNL.
Could you spare this for an enemy?
And Emperor Peter.
This is the point where I say something, right?
I think that'll work.
I think that should be it.
Yeah.
Today in the Senate, we discussed the mechanics of requesting and begging from the AI on the project of the internet in Civ, the value of defensive pacts between other humans and also with the AI. Lastly, we covered the Fast Moves article on Introduction into Industrial Era.
And in Forum Talk, we look at city ruins in you. Should you leave city ruins in your fat cross?
In the mailbag, we actually received some mail. One saying how wonderful it is to have found the show, and an anti-synergy inquiry. Is it a good or bad thing? Welcome to the Senate, where we discuss game strategy.
Could you spare this for a friend? Is a thread posted by Hankinsol on the Civilization Fanatics forums. He's wondering about the mechanics of the "could you spare this for a friend" option in the diplomacy screen. Specifically asks whether or not a previously refused request affects subsequent requests, and also how does the beaker cost of the requested tech affect the outcome. How does the diplomatic standing affect the outcome? In other words, is a request more likely to be accepted if you're at friendly rather than pleased status? Also, is it possible for a Civ to accept a request more often than once per game? And how does a leader affect requests you make?
You know, when I read this, I totally thought that it had Phil written all over it. I don't actually remember the particulars of it. I only remember really that the relevant part for anybody doing a sysfaf is that you shouldn't really do it unless you're pleased or better with the target AI, and probably once every 20 turns or so.
Yeah, that's pretty good advice. The linked thread is very informative on this, and yeah, it's dated, but a lot of the information in it is still good. Once every 20 turns is based on the 5% chance per turn that they forget that you made the request. If you make another request, it just resets the counter. So if you make too many requests, then you're not going to get anything. But on average, over 20 turns, they'll forget it. Really, one of the bigger uses for this that goes unmentioned, and really I haven't even been disciplined enough about it, is to guarantee peace for 10 turns. Now, one of the flaws in the default Beyond the Sword AI is that it won't declare. If you have a peace treaty, then it can't pick you as a war target. So not only will it not declare on you for those 10 turns, but if it decides to go to war during those 10 turns, then it is guaranteed not to be you. So that can be a big advantage just for making tiny requests. The link thread also goes into detail in terms of how much you can get on average across the game. And it points out that there's really no difference between pleased and friendly, no distinction between the types of AIs that you're making requests from, other than, of course, how difficult it is to get them to pleased or friendly. By the way, land target is a mechanic based on border share, not the same continent, because that's also used for war decisions by the AI as well as capitulation decisions. So land target is specifically, if you border them, they'll be more likely to give you larger amounts.
Yeah, this isn't something that I do very often, but seeing the post that you referred to that Raz put up, I think it's something I ought to try to do a little bit more. I guess it depends what kind of break you need in the game. If your land stinks or it's too tempting to take advantage of the AI's niceness. I guess I don't do it because I always reject requests of me from the AI, whether it's pride or arrogance or whatever you want to call it. I'd rather deal with whatever they have to throw at me than acquiesce.
One of the interesting things about AI requests is that the kind of request makes a big difference as to how harmful it is to reject it. I know we're going a little bit off topic, but it is related. If the AI is demanding, like, for example, gold or tech or a resource, and you refuse that, depending on the AI, ranging from Gandhi, who doesn't care at all, to like somebody like Washington or Tokugawa, who will get very pissy with you if you refuse, they could instantly start planning war against you. So from that standpoint, put yourself at risk if you refuse. But that's not the case for requests to stop trading with a civ or requests to declare war on a civ. In both cases, you get the -1, but in the latter case, you don't have the same risk for an instant decision to declare on you. What was I going to say about the conspiracy for good friend? Oh, there's one more benefit to it. If you are going to go to war with an AI, you can request like 1 gold from anyone who could be bribed to war against you, and that guarantees that they can't declare on you for 10 turns, and that they cannot take your target as a vassal for 10 turns. If you have enough strength, you can even do this to people who aren't at pleased. You'll take a diplo hit for it, but they'll probably give you 1 gold if you have a decent force, and then they're not going to be able to dogpile on you for 10 turns, and that's often all you need.
That article that was linked down there is mostly talking about, I think, whether you're pleased or friendly, because if you do this sort of, could you spare this for a friend request when you're not at pleased or friendly with a target, then it turns into a threat and the AI will respond accordingly. You'll lose points for each time you ask because you're threatening them instead of asking politely. If you're at war and you refuse a request that an AI gives to you, don't you get a Diplo penalty for that? Like, you refused to help us while we were at war. We were so desperate. Why didn't you help us?
Yes, you always get a -1, but the requests for gold, resources, or tech are special in that they can also instantly decide to attack you. But I can guarantee for the recent Beyond the Sword patches, they could even declare on you for refusing if they're already at war. I've seen it happen. That's not very common, but they can actually ignore that we have enough on our hands right now and attack you instantly for refusing a demand. But only of those kinds, not for stop trade or war requests, interestingly enough.
Yeah, I got declared enough times when I refused. I learned my lesson. If it's not too big, I usually give it to them.
Depends on what kind of win I'm going for. Usually I'll acquiesce if I'm specifically going for a Diplo win, but otherwise they can just kiss my butt.
Of course, if you have maces and they have swords, then, yeah, tell them to shove it. Get some easy great general points.
Yeah, I've got no problem turning them down almost every single time they ask for that. For better or for worse, I'm just like, no. Sometimes I pay for it, but if I pay for it in the short term, I get that back in the long term, so I'm not that too concerned about it.
In the forums, Fansu asks about the internet. He wants to know about the special building. Has anyone ever found it useful? He has not. He plays on Noble. Wants to know how useful it is even at some of the higher difficulties. I guess my initial reaction to that is anytime I have the opportunity to build the internet, I do. I think it's really valuable. Criteria are laid out here, as far as what's required in order for you to get text from other civs. I think it's going to depend on where you are in the game, but by the time you get to computers, you're probably working towards your long-term goals, space race, or some sort of the end of your victory conditions strategy. It really helps me fill in all of the gaps and cuts that I've had to make along the way to get where I am. And I think it affords a good opportunity to really workshop up for a final run at somebody, turn down the text ladder and put some gold into upgrading your units and stuff like that. So I definitely think it's worth building.
It depends on the difficulty level, I think. On Noble, it might not be so useful because the AIs won't be very advanced and you won't get that many texts.
Yeah, I think it's reasonably easy if you've played enough games to quantify what kind of value you'll get for going there. Now, computers is one of the prerequisites for going down the superconductors and genetics line, so you might have some incentive to go that route anyway. If you do go computers, the AI will tend to prioritize the satellite composites path before it will either the genetics path or the fusion path. So if you're going for a space race and it's a reasonably contested game, like you're not just blowing it out and landing in like the 16 or 1700s, there's a good chance that the internet will help you out. I would say it's almost vital in one city challenge. Even outside of that, it can give you way more beakers than your hammer investment to get it. I've gotten tens of thousands of beakers from building the internet that was directly related to the spaceship tax. Now, for anything other than space, I would actually not advocate it, just because, really, you don't need to go that deep in the tech tree for any of the military-based victories. And if you're going for something like UN, obviously you'll be going for mass media instead of computers, and it's much faster just to go straight to mass media. In culture, your slider is off long and good before you get there. So really the only victory condition where the internet really matters is space, because it's the only time you need to be that deep in the tech tree. But still, within that victory condition, it can be very useful.
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty much going to say the same thing. I usually don't get that far in the tech tree unless I'm pursuing a spatial victory. Otherwise, it's sort of irrelevant. I kind of usually stop teching drastically slow on tech after I discover rifles. Another thing about the internet is the Apollo program and the Manhattan Project and the SDI. They're projects, so projects are another type of wonder. You can't hurry them.
No.
Can't engineer rush them either.
Yeah, so that sucks.
That's true for all the spaceship parts, too, by the way.
This is true.
In competitive multiplayer, the internet as a wonder is almost always banned as being too powerful, especially in OCC type stuff where points or score has some sort of component to it.
Just to expand on a couple of points already made for perhaps some of our newer listeners, just to connect some of the dots, of course, OCC being one city challenge, and Phil mentioning about if you're running away with the game, not to bother, and that's because it grants all technologies held by at least 2 known civilizations. So if you are ahead in tech and you build it, you really ended up wasting 2,000 hammers in a city that you could be building something else in. Well, already been talked about both the space race and the culture victory, but if you're going for domination or conquest, if you're that much farther ahead, don't spend time building the internet. Just build some more units and go kick some butt.
Actually, the real reason, if you're going for domination or conquest, is you'll probably want to cut the slider sooner than that or take a different tech path. Mech infantry is nice, but it's really not necessary to take land, especially against the AI. You have all kinds of options that are better alternatives, one of being nukes, another just being massed air power on carriers that just completely eviscerate anything that you're attacking down to half strength, where even mech infantry dies very easily. You can go paratroopers and either nukes or cruise missiles, or just go with tanks and bombers and get the job done sooner before the AI gets out to mech infantry. I mean, any of those things will very quickly shore up domination in the late game, point where if you're attacking out the computers, you're probably just losing some time.
If they wanted to nerf down the effects of the internet at some point at a random event that works like the influenza one for medicine, be like spam in your email box or something.
Denial of service. Oh, no.
God. Just what we need. More events.
Events are all right.
Thank you, Peter. I think so, too.
The value of defensive pacts was started by user Awifka, or Awifka, I don't know. This thread is about defensive pacts, and basically if anybody uses them, when and why.
Yeah, so for those listening, what in the heck is a defensive pact in Civ 4, who may not know?
Oh, yeah, okay. Defensive pacts are enabled at military tradition, that tech. Most AIs require you to be friendly with them to form it, but some will do it at pleased. And if anybody declares on either of the nations that are in the defensive pact, the other one will declare on them. It's kind of interesting. If you declare on somebody else, you'll break a defensive pact. So if you have a defensive pact with 2 different AIs, and they don't have defensive pacts with each other, then someone declaring on one AI, you'll declare on them, and then the third guy will get out scot-free. So it's really only between 2 civs at once.
Don't you have to have open borders before you can get one?
No.
No, you just have to have a good enough disposition with them.
Oh, okay.
You can have closed borders and be friendly and get a defensive pact in theory, although certainly that +2 relations from open borders helps get them to the needed disposition.
Right.
Also, defensive pacts are one of the 2 ways to get enough turns with the AI to form a permanent alliance with, if that setting is on. It's worth some Diplo on its own. It can get up to +2 if you have a defensive pact with the AI for long enough. Probably the most relevant consideration for the defensive pact is the actual value of the pact. That's a little more interesting. The AI, when it considers declaring on a master vassal or defensive pact partners, will consider the power of both civs before declaring. But a lot of the AIs in this game are willing to declare on people much stronger than them. I think Montezuma is the most extreme. You have to have like 195% of his power or something before he won't declare on you. So defensive pacts are kind of a use with care mechanic, in my opinion. On the one hand, you can completely hide behind a dominant AI and go for culture or space, while the AI essentially shields you from any potential threat in the game. And on the other, forming a defensive pact with an AI can just get you into wars that you wouldn't have been in otherwise if the diplo situation is such that you can't get into a defensive pact with anybody who's running away in power. So there's actually a lot of strategy to using them.
Yeah, there's and if you're a beginner player, there's really no point to signing a defensive pact with anybody that's weaker than you, for instance. And I think when AIs will ask for a defensive pact, usually they'll be the weaker one. I don't really remember any instances of stronger civs saying, "Oh, I really want to protect you." It doesn't really work that way.
They will if you just ask them for it, though, if they're at a high enough disposition.
But you have to ask first.
Well, yeah, that makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, I know.
I think it depends where you are in the game and where you're going. By the time around the military tradition, I'm looking for the cabs anyway, so it's not something that I've used a whole lot. It seems to actually get me in more wars than it keeps me out of, but that's not something I can really quantify.
I used it in the most recent of the Immortal University series, because one of our neighbors, we had 2 neighbors on the continent, and I axe rushed one and completely wiped them out, but that let the other AI get pretty big. So by the time military tradition rolled around and we met other civs on the other continent, my neighbor was pretty strong. Based on the land I acquired in the cottages, I was able to get ahead in tech, but I was just miserable in power. So I wound up hiding behind the other AI for probably like 100 turns while I was trying to get to space. And I didn't break the defensive pact until I had to interrupt the culture victory on the other continent. I used nukes and paratroopers. And then my defensive pact ally launched a spaceship, so I had to go kill him too. We launched very close, but he launched first. So I actually nuked and paradropped into his capital and burned it. Just completely used that AI and then abused it at the end. It's kind of nasty, but yeah, it's a helpful aspect of defensive pacts, definitely.
Well, unlike Joel, I always found they got me into more wars than anything, and I've avoided them except in cooperative multiplayer games with humans entering into defensive pacts with them, but other than that...
Oh, come on now. I mean, you have de facto defensive pacts long before they're available in that setting.
Well, now this is true, but it's just kind of a formal recognition of that once I'm actually able to get it in game.
I suppose.
Especially if I know I'm not going to be the aggressor. Because sometimes, depending upon your placement in the game, you don't have as much opportunity to go to war and build up, and you're kind of crunched in there, so it's like, okay, sure, why not? But I'm always paying attention to, of course, defensive pact that AIs have with each other.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, that's true. That doesn't happen that often.
Yeah, it doesn't, but you need to pay attention, because the last thing you want to do is declare on like 3 people by accident. Well, no, technically the other 2 declare on you, but it still sucks. So it is a good thing to check before you declare, because there are ways to get them out of it. Probably the easiest one is just to get one of the AIs involved at war with somebody else before you declare, because that'll break it. But you can also flip civics and get them pissy with each other and do things like that. That'll eventually get them to cancel it as well.
What about the stop trading with? Will that cancel it?
Yes, although that's a good point. It's very hard to do that because so few AIs are actually willing to do stop trades with people that they're actually willing to sign a defensive pact with in the first place. But I find it often just as hard, if not harder, to bribe an AI from trading with another AI as I would to just get them to declare war. In fact, some AIs are easier to bribe to war than stop trades. But yes, that would cancel the defensive pact if you could convince them to do it.
Yeah, they've gotten me in more wars than helped me out as well, so I don't really use them anymore. But it was probably because I didn't pay enough attention to Dipload. So I guess if you're careful with them, they can be useful.
In the thread, Obsolete said he would like to see brought back the Mutual Alliance Pact.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. Civ 3, right?
Yes, from Civ 3.
You know, I kind of would, too. I would also definitely like the AI to factor in that you just signed the defensive pact when it's plotting a war on you or on the AI, because it doesn't. And he pointed out accurately that it did in Civ 3, but it doesn't now. Once an AI makes war plans, any change to its target power is absolutely irrelevant, which is just terrible. Why are the war mechanics like that in Civ 4 if that's how it is? So once they start plotting war, they will declare on their target. Very few things that can actually stop them from doing that.
For those listening who may not be familiar with Civ 3, what are we talking about with the Mutual Protection Pact? You are obligated to declare war on any Civ that attacks the Civ with which you've established the pact, but under no such obligation if your ally is the one who initiates the attack.
In fact, I remember in Civ 3 you might have gotten a Diplo minus for declaring while you're on a Mutual Protection Pact. I don't remember, though.
I think that's just if you declare on the person you're in the pact with.
Yeah.
Interestingly, you don't in Civ 4, although you do get the merits for having a defensive pact signed with people they don't like. You get a -1 for that, I believe. But there's really no penalty for declaring on somebody you have a defensive pact with beyond what you would get for just declaring on them if you didn't have a defensive pact.
That negative diplomatic modifier, do I remember correctly that is if your defensive pact then goes away, that goes away too in that moment?
Yes, that's correct. It would go away instantly.
And I guess what's left to say, if you don't get as far as military tradition in your games, then you can just ignore this whole topic now that you've listened to it.
Mass horse archer rush, baby.
This is a Fast Moves introduction article on how to play Civilization 4 during the Industrial Era.
It's quite a massive article, and it's a good article, too.
The nice thing about the Industrial Era is that you start getting a lot of the really interesting units. So you start getting muskets, you start getting rifles, so on and so forth.
Well, let me just say that interesting is subjective.
Oh, yeah, this is true. The biggest impression I get from this article is just like, good job, Fast Move people.
They talk about it from a multiplayer perspective. It talks about the new city and the technology tree, the civics, the trait, the civs, the initial build-up. A lot of these steps which are also illustrated with screenshots, including the initial build-up, the turn-by-turn screenshots. Also talks about workshops, and attacking, and also point racing. This was roasted by Shizanu. I hope I'm pronouncing that properly. I think I am.
I think it's a real good article. It is from a multiplayer perspective, and when I first started playing online, I thought it was really hard to start in an era. So used to playing from ancient, and you're used to having improved land, and you're used to like a settler cost and maintenance costs and stuff like that. The ability to start in a new era, units are more expensive, your ability to produce them is lessened. I think they did a really good job here showing how to deal with that. Obviously, if you're playing from ancient, you're not going to take some of the strategy laid out here, but for what it's intended, I think they did a real thorough job. Admittedly, I'm a pretty awful Indu player online, but I really rely on being more powerful than my opponents when playing in this era, because I think it is really hard to attack unless you just have massive stack of calves.
Probably my favorite thing about this article is it goes into the meta game of these starts a little bit, including just not teching and just instantly spamming cavalry since you can, or also going for steel. And then they'll discuss the drawbacks of doing that if your opponent gets combustion before you, for example, because then you have difficulty covering any coastal cities that you may have. It goes into a lot of the possibilities that you can see, but just from the tech choices you have right from the get-go. And you do have a number of tech choices that each provide substantial benefits to your empire that you have to decide between.
Right, and I think something else that's decidedly multiplayer about it, in single player, you probably know the quantity and quality of all the AI's units. In this article, even though it seems like the end goal in an Indu match is to points and score, you still got to build a killer stack first because someone else is doing the same thing for you. I think it's very thorough. Well done.
In terms of the way that this article is written, for example, if you actually started from ancient, you probably would delay scientific method a lot longer than if you had just started this way, because depending on how heavy of a monastery builder you are, scientific method can really be something that you want to delay until you kind of have to. Unless you just don't care and you manage to get research without religion. You can manage to get research without religion, but anyway, different modes of gameplay. But when you start in the industrial era, I feel like it's always good to start out by right after I reach the industrial era. I kind of amass a bunch of cash just in order to upgrade all the rifles. The thing that's really characteristic about the industrial era is all the upgrades that you can do. But that's only if you have the money.
I actually don't do a lot of upgrading, usually. It depends. Depends what kind of gold infrastructure I have. I might just use the obsolete units and then replace them or leave them behind as garrison or whatever.
This is especially a setting used for the Clan Championship Cup. I don't have it in front of me, but I'm just taking a guess. It's probably a 90 or 100 turn game, 2 city elimination, and they usually have different civs or traits that you're not allowed to pick as leaders.
Yeah, I think he mentioned in the article that England and Russia tend to be banned, but that India is arguably better than either. And that makes a lot of sense, especially if you're playing on faster speeds, because that's where the fast worker really shines. And then it just gets your empire set up so much more rapidly, too.
It's tough not to like the fast worker.
Either leader you would pick would be spiritual on top of that, so I could see that being really versatile.
Yeah, spiritual is a lot better when you have all those civic options.
You might actually use serfdom. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Not from an ancient start, but maybe in this kind of thing. If you just have slew of land and you have spiritual and you're in the industrial era, that changes the equation quite a bit. Once you have steam power plus that, you can do a couple things instantly that you would normally take multiple turns for.
This is Forum Talk, where we investigate hot Civ issues in the forums.
So the thread started by Yasha says, what are my fellow Civ players' opinions on city ruins? I normally leave them in my city's BFC, the Big Fat Cross, hoping to get the research event from it. But in my latest game, I burnt down 5 of them and left all of them. Okay, so some of them were in prime grassland river spots, robbing me of a nicely fully cottage tile by endgame. I've only managed to get the research event once this game, even with all those ruins, so I'm reevaluating my stance on them, especially when they are located riverside. Thoughts and opinions? Now, I like events in-game overall, but I don't like events that much. If it's in your Big Fat Cross, unless it is a tile that you cannot improve now or a tile that you can never improve ever, then what is the point? Even if you have events turned on, what is the point of leaving the city ruins there? You're denying yourself the ability to actually work that tile, and you know that you will actually be able to use that tile, as opposed to rolling the dice on this random event, which has, by the way, as posted by Peace of Mind from the XML, an active weight of 90 out of 1,000.
You know, as much as I hate events, this is one of the more tolerable ones because you actually have some control over it. One of the interesting things is that the game kind of picks which event you get randomly. So if you have valid good events, God forbid, then you actually do have less chance of encountering like your fort being lit on fire at random 4 times or slave revolts or whatever else. Empire-wide, just the fact that you have a city ruin inside your empire gives you a chance of tripping that event rather than something else. And yeah, it's a positive event. Now, I would not advocate leaving like a riverside grassland tile as city ruins or something just to get the event. But if it's kind of a marginal tile, like a non-riverside plains or tundra or desert or really anything that's not a high priority tile, you probably want to leave it there. Not only for the positive benefits of the event, but just to reduce the odds of getting something that's truly garbage and harmful to you. And I would much rather have this event than another slave revolt. God, triple slave revolts in the BC.
Yeah, I definitely agree. If I have events on, city ruins are definitely the ones that I improve last. And knowing the AI city placement, it can be on a really bad tile that's not worth improving, like Phil said. In general, though, I don't know if it's a great strategy to structure your game around events. There's no point to doing them unless you're hoping for that event to come. Otherwise, just forget it. Just raise it.
If it is in a riverside grassland tile that's not in a city's Big Fat Cross, but it's in your cultural borders, so it's still within your control, well then fine.
That's true. If you are blowing up the game, it has a nice aesthetic touch. Just leave the smoldering ruins there.
Yeah.
Oh, one other thing. The amount of city ruins doesn't matter. Don't leave more than 1. It makes absolutely no difference whether you have 5 or 1 city ruin.
See, that's answering what that original guy said then.
Yeah.
Because he's like, I left 5 in there and I didn't get it once.
We talked a little earlier about starting in the industrial era or a little later on in the game. It does obsolete any one of the following 6 technologies in the order that they are listed in the event. Radio, refrigeration, plastics, satellites, advanced flight, or ecology. Any one of those will ensure that you will not see this event anymore.
I never really do anything in advance of hoping to get a certain random event. You know, certainly if it's a tile I could be working, I would definitely improve it. And I certainly, if I were going to take a city, I wouldn't raise it just to have city ruins and plant somewhere else unless it was just an awful choice. If it doesn't hurt to leave it, I'd probably leave it. If it's something I could use, I'm definitely going to improve.
There was this one comment on there, and I think reasonably and understandably cut him down, Phil, where, about the patience is key. Those who say, build some stupid cottage, only think of the shiny coins, not the turns upon research that could be avoided once the event happens. Oh, dear.
Yeah, sometimes they get carried away in these event threads. But yeah, I mean, an improved cottage with all the research multipliers in the city is very likely going to overtake the event, especially because the event isn't guaranteed. So on average, your expected returns from using the tile for something else, provided it's a good tile, is going to be higher just using the tile than the event. But if it's a completely trash tile, there's no reason, if you're not going to work it anyway, to spend work returns on that rather than somewhere else anyhow.
Greetings from the Mailbag, where we address listener questions and comments.
We actually got mail. We haven't had a mailbag topic in a while. The first email is a very quick one because, we like emails that tell us how great we are, and we should tell our listeners how great we are in case they forget. So...
How much chance per turn for our listeners to forget? What was it, 5%?
I think it's much higher than that.
From Chad Reynolds. Started playing Civ 4 a little over a year ago, and I recently stumbled over the PolyCast podcast on iTunes. I just wanted to send an email to say how much I have enjoyed listening to all the episodes. They are great to listen to on my trips driving back and forth to college. I have listened all the way back to episode 70 now, and I love every minute. You guys make it really funny and interesting and always have a great range of topics. Plus, it's cool to hear people I read posts on the forums on the episodes talking about different aspects of the game. So thanks, and looking forward to many more episodes. C.J. Reynolds on Civ Fanatics.
See, that's why I was brought on, because I spam forum posts. So I'm recognizable. Awesome.
I would ask you, why do you think everything is about you, Phil? But you said a couple of episodes ago, I'm the MeInTeam, what do you want from me? So I just auto-filled that response, like I had that conversation in my head with you. Chad, if you are looking for more episodes, you've only listened back to episode 70? Come on now, what's going on? We've got 69 other episodes and specials and promos and blooper reels. Let's get going. From Marcus 2001 on traits, unique units, and unique building anti-synergy. In preface, I hate the word synergy, but I try not to let that influence my response. Anyway.
Instant failure.
I'm sure you would agree that having synergy between unique units, unique buildings, and traits is cool. When a financial civ like England can build a stock exchange for more money, or when an aggressive leader like Shaka can build a unique building barracks for half price and then use it to train a unique unit with it, then it all makes sense, quote unquote. You wouldn't have a financial civ, you would have a financial leader. Continuing, quote, but some civs have what I call anti-synergy. For example, the Celts have a unique unit called the Gallic Warrior, which starts off with the Guerrilla 1 promotion. Then they have a unique building called the Dun, which also gives units built in that city the Guerrilla 1 promotion. My question is, why give Guerrilla 1 promotion to a unit which already starts with a Guerrilla 1 promotion? You think I'm going to build archers when I have this cool unique unit available? I don't think so, unquote.
Oh my. First of all, the Dun doesn't give Guerrilla 1 to melee. So there's no actual overlap of a promotion. It's not like Tokugawa upgrading his samurai and gunpowder his drill anyway or something. It's not really true anti-synergy from that standpoint.
Asynergy, it's not anti-synergy. It's not like they specifically work against each other.
But it isn't asynergy. There's some specific synergy there, which is why this question is confusing me. Because you now have access to both melee and archery that gets Guerrilla 2 straight out of the gate without any special amount of experience. I mean, with 3 experience, you can have Guerrilla 2 on basically anything but Siege. Now, that's not going to be very helpful against AI that can spam units everywhere and garrison every city equally. But when you have guerrilla forces moving around in hills and pillaging and choking, that can be pretty nasty. Not only does the Dun give bonuses to archers, but it also gives it to longbows, which are incredibly difficult to dislodge on hills then, and to muskets and potentially grenadiers if you avoid rifling. So you can keep going with the Dun for quite some time.
One of the first pieces of advice I ever got about playing is to play to your traits. Figure out what is your unique unit, what's your unique building, and probably most importantly, when are these things. figure out how that is going to factor into your strategy when you see things like the map, the resources, what victory conditions are available, that kind of stuff. And I think any kind of synergy or anti-synergy can be helped in that respect, especially if you're playing with unrestricted leaders. You can come up with some pretty powerful combinations like aggressive Rome, pro-Mali, aggressive France. Some of the civs seem to work a little bit better with their unique unit and building, like Mongolia. Some of them don't make a whole lot of sense. I don't necessarily think that it's a bad thing. Sometimes they work together. Sometimes you can use them on different units.
Plus, some of that is where if you have a lot of synergy, that might be for game balance, helping out a civ that otherwise wouldn't be so great. Whereas if you get someone like Hammurabi, his unique unit's kind of bad. Really doesn't mesh well with his trait at all. But he's got a good trait set, and on top of that, his unique building's pretty good, and his trait set's pretty good. So it kind of balances him out a little bit. So you don't get a bunch of leaders that are just ridiculously powerful. But man, Protective Malinese is just wrong. I've done some chokes with those. It's just stupid. They can't do anything, even if they have axes.
The thing is, if you have unique buildings and unique units that work together too well, I think it really confines you to one sort of gameplay when you play that civ, if that makes sense.
Good example is Rome.
Yes, good.
Rome is interesting because their leaders actually have pretty good traits. They can expand well, and they can expand well peacefully as well as militarily. But a lot of players will just try to pigeonhole on Beeline Iron and go on a Praetorian rampage. And if you spawn next to Sitting Bull or another protective civ who builds lots of units, that could go poorly. And at least certainly more poorly than just rapid expanding into your land if you have enough land.
Sure, and any advantage that you have with any of your unique units or buildings is definitely going to be confined to a particular time in the game. So if you're playing any kind of full-length game, if I end up being France, that's going to end up changing the way that I play. I'm going to try and make lots of muskets, and that's not something I normally do, but I'm going to try and take advantage of what's available to me at the time.
I think the synergy for the Celts is mostly to get Guerrilla 3 units. Guerrilla 3 is really good promotion, I think.
Yeah, the withdraw chance.
Yeah. Both of the Celt leaders are charismatic, so they need less experience for that third promotion, and add to that the unique building, and you can get those Guerrilla 3 units out pretty fast. Not that useful in the beginning with archers and longbows, unless you're defending, of course.
They are very good for choking, though.
Yeah.
And threatening multiple cities in hilly terrain.
And even taking workers.
For those listening and wondering what is the Guerrilla promotion, Guerrilla 1 plus 20% hills defense, Guerrilla 2 plus 30% hills defense and double movement on hills, and then Guerrilla 3 plus 50% withdrawal chance. His question is, you think I'm going to build archers when I have this cool unique unit available? I don't think so. Well, everything is situational. I wouldn't be rolling out building archers with the Dun and having Guerrilla 1 depending upon particular circumstances. I think we addressed that question, didn't we?
Yeah, we haven't covered Sitting Bull a whole lot.
Yeah, so for our listeners' benefit, since they don't have a copy of the email. Quote, then we have Sitting Bull, who is protective. Fine. And his unique building is a totem pole, which gives archers additional promotions. Cool. But his unique unit is not an archer, but an axeman called the Dog Soldier, which receive 100% against melee units. Okay, so since my cities are going to be attacked by axeman swordsmen anyway, obviously I'm going to use this wonderful unique unit to defend my cities. So who cares about the protective trait or the totem pole? Unquote.
The basic calling card for Sitting Bull is that he is guaranteed defenses without any resources at all. That's true against melee with his Dog Soldier. But yeah, you're not always going to defend with Dog Soldiers. If you skip archery as Native America and get chariot rushed, you are screwed. Not just a little bit screwed, you lose. So you do want the archers. Interestingly, you can take formation instantly with your archers because of the totem pole. So if they do try to go with just the chariot force, your archers can kill them outright, and chariots don't get defensive bonuses. But also, just the City Garrison 3, it's more cost-effective against some of the attackers, especially things like catapult and horse archers and that kind of stuff, than you would get out of your Dog Soldier. The totem pole also works for longbows and crossbows, so again, you can get Guerrilla 2 on your archery units, even just basic archers, and defend your strategically placed hills very easily and for cheap, and you can go on the offensive a little bit with the longbows since you have access to extra promotions with them. If you're willing to go the full theocracy, vassalage, and totem pole and barracks route, you can get, I believe, 10 experience longbows right away. I'm pretty sure the totem pole is +3 experience starter units, which means just the 4 from the civics will get you a level 4 unit immediately, which unlocks incredible things like Drill 4 and other very advanced promotions.
It's being called anti-synergy here because it doesn't necessarily go with the dog soldiers, but it's just a different way of playing. You know what the totem pole does, you know what dog soldiers do. I don't think they necessarily have to work together, and if they did, that would probably be tougher to deal with than it is now. For dog soldiers, you don't need copper hooked up, you just need bronze working. You can get early dog soldiers into your neighbors' lands, maybe before they have archery, dead warrior. If you're having heavily upgraded archery units, longbows, crossbows, they're just killer. They may not be the dog soldier, but you're still using your unique building in the way that is best advantageous to you. It may not work with the unique unit as well as you'd like, but I wouldn't say that it's detrimental.
The totem pole just makes protective even better, if that was possible.
Yeah, rushing Sitting Bull is probably like the worst thing ever. If you get like a super early chariot rush on him, you might pull it off. After that, forget it.
Markets 2001 concludes by saying, what are your opinions on anti-strategy? Is this a screw-up by Firaxis, or is this intentional? And is it a good thing or a bad thing, quote-unquote? I don't think it's a screw-up. Intentional? Well, it would make sense. I mean, there is some of the balance that we've been talking about in there. And whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, I guess some screw-ups could be classified as a good thing if it ended up getting you something else just as good or better of what you were going for. But I don't think there's a problem here on either the Celt front or the Native American front.
Variety is the spice of Civ.
I don't think it's a screw-up either. I think a lot of the unique buildings and units are historically based. You just got to figure out what benefits each of them has and use them to your advantage. If you want to improve your Civ, you could try unrestricted leaders and doing it with the traits.
I think it's better than everybody just being Sid Meier and having no traits, nothing unique. So.
No, you see, that's what happens. Sid has all of the traits, but then they cancel each other out, so he ends up having none. That's how that happened. Little known fact.
He's just so pro that he doesn't need any traits. That's what it is. When he plays as himself on deity with, like, no hands at all, and he still wins.
Mind control.
Yeah. He just thinks about it, and his units move just as he wants, and with perfect micro.
Call in today. In North America, the number is 301-637-7659.
That's 301-637-POLY.
In Europe, 44121-288-7659. That's 44121-288-POLY.
You can Skype us at the PolyCast or email us at thepolycast@gmail.com.
The only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about.
For more information on PolyCast,
our sibling shows ModCast and RevCast,
or about PolyCast in general,
log on to the series' official website at
thepolycast.net.
Back to something that Joel said earlier with regards to land stinks. Land stinks. Yeah. Well, this is why you shouldn't forget to come on to episodes, Mackie. I end up singing. So.
No, Mackie, I miss you. Come back. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, so hear that, Mackie? Lisa doesn't actually want you to come back?
Shut up.
Yeah, we have it on record. It's recorded and everything, so, yeah.
Nah.
That sounded like a sheep. Are we doing barnyard animals now? Okay. There you go.
Early Saturday morning.
Okay, I don't know a song using those words. I'll just make one up. Early Saturday morning.
We might have to go Mackie on him soon, guys. Even if it takes all of us.
This was episode 89. Thanks for listening from myself, Emperor Peter, DanQ,
Bye all.
colonelmustard,
Thanks for having me, guys.
Q&L,
No more dirty jokes.
and TheMeInTeam.
I am the internet.
If you were here, Mackie, you could introduce this topic. But you're not.
Oh.
Okay.
Record date
February 10th, 2010.
Civilization 4, Warlords and Beyond the Sword, sound clips, copyright Take-Two Interactive. Copyright Civilized Communication at civcom.net.